I will show you how to spot and solve the one simple Sudoku strategy that most other solvers overlook. And with that, it's solving time. First, get some easy solves out of the way. If you look here in block 9, you might notice you have a 2 cutting across row 7 and a 2 cutting across row 9. So the only place you can put a 2 in this block is right here. And then if you follow the ones, you'll notice a 1 is in row 9 and another is in column 7. So the only place to put a 1 in block 9 is right here. Greetings, friend. This expert-rated puzzle requires a simple strategy to solve that is so easy to overlook. I will show you the best way to spot and solve that strategy. But first, you need to look for digit restrictions from 1 to 9. So if you look at where the ones can be, you might notice with these two ones, there's only 2 places for a 1 in block 6. So you want to mark in any 3 by 3 block that has 2 possibilities for a candidate, or solve a candidate if you can in that block. With these 2 ones, you'll notice there's only 2 places for a 1 in block 7. With these 2 ones, only 2 places here in block 5. And with these 2 ones, only 2 places here in block 1. There's more than 2 places in block 4, so I'm not going to mark that. Move on to the 2s, and you might see with these 2s, you can solve for 2 in block 2. But there's no places to do marks for 2 candidates for the 2s. So move on to the 3s. With these 3s, 2 places for a 3 in block 3. With these 3s and this 3, 2 places in block 4. And then in block 8, with these 2 3s, 2 places right here. This is how you find the restrictions to get more solves in the puzzle faster. Okay, move on to the 4s. You might see with these 2 4s and this 4, you can solve for 4 in block 1. And then with these 2 4s and these 2 4s, solve for 4 in block 4. And then with these 2 4s and this 4, you can solve for 4 in block 8. And once you displace that 3 candidate, you can solve this other cell for 3 right away. And then finish up the 4s. You notice with those 2 4s cutting across, you can solve for the last remaining 4 in block 9. Okay, move on to the 5s. You might see with these 2 5s and this 5, only 1 place for a 5 in block 8. And then with this 5 and the 5 coming up, column 7, 2 places for a 5 here in block 6. But these 5s are special. They're a pointing pair, which means since the 5s are in the same row in block 6, you cannot have a 5 anywhere else outside that block in the row. If you try to put a 5 in these spots, then you'd block out all places for a 5 in block 6. So 5s can't be here, and with these 5s, you only have 2 places for a 5 now in block 4. No other marks you can make with the 5s. Move on to the 6s. Okay, with this 6 cutting across row 3 and this 6 coming up column 6, you have a pointing pair of 6s here in block 2. They're in the same column 5, so 6s can't be here. Restricts the 6s to these 2 spots in block 5. And then with these 2 6s, 2 places for a 6 in block 7. And if you're just not familiar with these terms like pointing pairs, naked hidden singles, I covered all in my free Sudoku solving guide. All right, move on from the 6s to the 7s. You only have 1 7 here, but if you notice in block 9, there's only 2 cells remaining. So you got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. This can be a 7 or a 9. And I'm going to do center marking here because this represents a naked pair 7, 9. Nothing else with the 7s. Move on to the 8s. With these 2 8s, only place for an 8 in block 8's right there. And then with these 2 8s, You'll notice the 8s are restricted to the same 2 cells as the 6s. Makes them a hidden pair or a naked pair if you notice that you already have the 7, 9 right there. So you can mark those 8s right there. And then with this 8 coming up and this 8 cutting across, you have a pointing pair of 8s in block 6. Go with this 8. 3 places for an 8 right here. Not going to mark that. Reason is you don't want to add too much clutter, and you'll get in a habit of doing these marking of 2 candidates that if you remove a candidate, you can solve the other one right away. If you put 3 there, you cannot do that, and so you have to remember not to. That's why I think it's easier just to do the 2 candidates and mark them in a 3x3 block. All right, move on to the 9s. And you'll see with this 9 coming down, column 2, there's only 2 places for a 9 in block 7, and they're on top of the 1s, so you end up with a hidden pair, 1, 9, right there. And it's also a pointing pair, so a 9 cannot be here. The only other place for a 9 in block 8 is right there. And since you have 8 of 9 cells filled out here, you can solve that for a 7. And you're almost to the point where you need the simple strategy to move further. But first, the question of the day. What is more satisfying for you? Spotting a hidden pattern or filling in the very last cell? Please, 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 please drop it in the comments. Share with me and the other viewers. Help me grow the internet's best Sudoku community. It starts with your feedback. After you go through digit restrictions 1 through 9, and you got a few solves, go back through and now focus on heavy houses. These are rows, columns, and blocks that have at least 5 cells filled out. So you might notice column 4 here is got 7 cells filled out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9. You just need a 6 and a 7. Well, with the 7 right here, that's got to be your 7, and that's got to be your 6. You might also notice with the 1, 9 here, 6, 8 here, and 2, 3, 4, 5, you only have 1 empty cell right there. This has to be a 7. Or you could have looked across row 7. Okay, take these 7s, and you can solve for 7 in block 4, and restricts the 7s to these 2 cells in block 1. Also notice after the 6, 7 here, you just have a 1, 3, and a 9 naked triple remaining in block 5. And because you have a 3 in the row, that can't be a 3, this can't be a 1, and you restrict the 3s to these 2 cells in block 5. But that's about it. That's all you're going to get unless you know what to look for next. And there's at least 2 ways to make the next solve. But the key cell you need to focus on right now is this one right here. Row 5, column 1. You have to solve this cell if you want to make more progress in this puzzle. And you would likely not fill it out because there's some other heavy houses that are more appealing, but this one is critical. And to see how to solve it, what I found and what you need to look at is notice these 4 cells right here. This is a simple strategy that's easily overlooked. You notice how the 1s are restricted to these 2 cells in block 1, but they're also restricted to these 2 cells in block 7. So they're restricted to columns 1 and 3 in blocks 1 and 7. So what it tells you is a 1 cannot be in these 3 cells in column 2, and it cannot be in these 3 cells in column 2. So where can a 1 be in column 2? It has to be in one of these 3 cells right here. But since it's 3 empty cells, you normally would not mark that. But a 1 has to be in one of these cells. That's called a claiming triple. This is easily overlooked because you don't normally mark it, and you may not notice how these ones interact with it. But what it does is it restricts a 1. You cannot have 1s in any of these 4 cells, including our green cell right here. So what could this cell be? If you notice in column 1, you have a 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. So what's remaining is a 1, 5, 8, and 9. Well, if you notice, you have the pointing pair of 5s right here. That can't be a 5. If you see the pointing pair of 8s right there, that can't be an 8. And that you may not have been included in because remember, you didn't mark the 8s there. And now with this claiming triple of 1s, this can't be a 1 either. And so you have a nice naked single 9 in this green cell. You've got to find this. And now you don't want to overlook any other strategies as you make more progress in the puzzle. So go nice and easy, and let's see what else we can find. You want to look at the impact on row, column, and block as you proceed from this point. And so the impact on the column, if a 9 right here, that means this has to be a 1, and that's got to be your 9. And then with this 1, you can displace that 1, solve this cell for 1, displacing that 7. Look at the impact on this column. You have a 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. You just need a 2, 6, and an 8. Well, you have the 2 and the 6 right there. That means this cell has to be an 8, allowing you to disambiguate the 6, 8 right there. You have a full house, only one cell remaining. This has to be your 2. Okay? And then after doing that, now where do you want to look? You might notice with these 2 8s, you can solve this cell for an 8. So it leaves in column 1 a 5 right there. Look at the impact here in row 4. You have a 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. You need a 1 and a 9. Well, with this 9, that's your 1. That's going to be your 9, which displaces that 1, displaces that 3, which is why you want to just mark 2 possibilities for a candidate. It makes this part of solving so much faster. Because with that 3 now, you can displace this 3, solve for a 3 here, which just leaves a 6 in block 4. And then with this 1, you can displace that 1, solve this cell now for a 1. Okay, continue on with the solves here. But you might notice if you look across row 6, you have 7 digits filled out. Always focus on those heavy houses. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You need a 2 and a 9. Pull a 2 from right there. So there's your 2, there's your 9. What's the impact in this column? Well, that can't be a 9 anymore. That's a 7, and that's going to be a 9. Check out the impact on that with these 9s and this 9. You can solve for a 9 right here. And then with these 9s and this 9, solve for a 9 right there. Leaves you with just a 5 and a 7 to finish column 6. So you can mark that. But you can do even better than that. Look at this heavy house. Column 9. You got a 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9. You need a 2, 5, and a 7. Show you my neat naked triple trick. You have the 2, 7. Look at this cell. And the 7 repeats. Whenever you see that, you can solve all 3 cells. Because you know this has to be your 5. The only place the 7 can go is right there. And this is going to be your 2. And after solving that, you can look at these 2's. Solve this for a 2, which leaves a 5 here in block 1. And with this 7, you can disambiguate the 5, 7 right there. And now with these 2 5's and this 5, you can solve for a 5 in block 3, displacing that 3. Leaves you with just a 6 and an 8 right here. With this 8, that's got to be your 8, and this has to be your 6. So with the 8 right there, you can displace the 8, solve this for an 8, and just leaves you with a 6 in block 6. All right, let's finish up the last 3 cells. Because of the 6 in row 2, displace that 6, solve this for a 6. Leaves you with just a 3 and a 8 right here. With this 3, pulling on over. There's your 3, and your last cell is an 8. Now, see if you can spot the easily overlooked strategy in this next puzzle. Thank you so much for watching.